Welcome back to the third edition of the Wildcast. I am your host, Canyon Allis. Along here with co-host tonight, we have Gary Randazzo. We are of the Wildcat Sports Report on the 24/7 Sports Network, your all Arizona athletics go-to site. Gary, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Canyon. How are you?
Doing excellent. Camp, football season, everything is right here. I'm very excited. And we've got a new era as far as the Matt Scott era at the University of Arizona. Very exciting. Comes in this year with a new offense, not doing the same things that we've seen him do in the past. A lot of change this year at the quarterback position, Gary. What do you think about the Matt Scott era underway?
I think, like everybody else, I'm really excited about Matt Scott. I think what's interesting about him is, we're talking about the Matt Scott era, but it's only going to be for one season. So his challenge is twofold. He needs to step right in, play well as a fifth-year senior, but he's also kind of got to set the curve for the future quarterbacks that Rich Rod and the staff is recruiting. So he's got a lot of pressure on his shoulders, and a lot of that extends well beyond this season.
One of the things that's interesting about his position is, he's the leader, he's the senior, and kind of what you touched base on is he's not your average senior to where he knows enough about the offense to help younger guys. He's kind of learning as he goes along. It'll be very interesting. I mean, in the past, when he has stepped in from Foles, obviously redshirting last year, he's done a great job. Now, running a totally different offense this year, coming in, he's going to be doing a lot more running as well as passing. How do you like Scott as a dual threat quarterback, Gary?
It's going to be really fun to watch. I think for Scott, you can see the excitement in his face at the Pac-12 Media Day, just talking about kind of a return to his roots. I mean, people forget, he's been at Arizona for 4 years, going on 5. But back at Centennial High School in Corona, California, he was a dual-threat quarterback running a spread read option offense. He was the Long Beach Press Telegram Best in the West list. He was a Prep Star All-American. He was a finalist for the Joe Montana Award, and the reason for that was he, threw for a little over 2,400 yards as a senior for 19 touchdowns. He rushed over 1,000 yards as a senior on 131 carries. I think he had about 1,100 yards and 13 more TDs. So, for Scott, it's going to be one of those situations where can he re-tap into those great old memories of running and throwing for touchdowns, and this time, doing it at the college stage as opposed to the high school stage. But I think as a fifth-year senior, he is more than capable. He's kind of been through it all, ups and downs, which is something you kind of like as an analyst from a player. He hasn't been coddled much, had to put up with, backing up Willie Tuitama. Then he had to back up Nick Foles when it looked like the job was going to be his. He lost that starting job in that Iowa game after a really tough performance in that loss. And he showed well last year when he picked up for Foles in a 4-game stretch, led Arizona to 4 wins, basically accounted for 3 of those wins by himself. So, fans have seen a little bit of Scott. They haven't seen enough of Scott, but I can guarantee that they have not seen the Scott that they're about to see this year based on this new offense that Rich Rod is implementing.
And I think you have a very unique situation with Scott, as you mentioned for the last 4 years has been in the product of one system, really a passing, a wide open system where they're lining up 3 wide receivers at a time, a lot of single back sets. Early in his career, you had the tight end with Gronkowski in there, then kind of in the last couple of years kind of went away with that. So early on, he's been trained to pass and throw the ball downfield. Now, we all know about the great footwork that he has and his speed, his ability to take off and run. So now you kind of add the experience that he's got in the passing game in the Stoops era mixed with what is about to become more of a running and dual threat. So having had that experience, I think that really gives him a weapon as far as compared to most dual threat quarterbacks, that he's been in a system where primarily his job was to throw downfield and not bail out of the pocket. Very interesting to see how that experience plays out over the field. Now, one thing that it's got to be a little bit of a concern as far as Scott goes, since he will be running a little bit more with the option offense and running downfield, getting to the second level of the defense, he's probably going to take a few more hits and harder hits at that than he has in the past. we'll see how he holds up, but chances are, with him taking as many hits as he probably will, there's a good chance that we might see more than one quarterback out on the field this year. And that brings up another player I want to discuss today, is Richard Morse, and how he has, Rich Rod wants to use him at quarterback, yes, wants to have him at receiver, wants to have him on the field as far as almost at all times because of how dangerous he is. So I pose a question to you, Gary. Do you have confidence in Richard Morrison, and do you think that having him play receiver and quarterback could stunt his growth as far as quarterback is concerned?
Yeah, I think the latter part of your question is a big concern. I mean, Sean Miller in basketball talked about freshman Nick Johnson this past year, having to learn two positions, which is really uncommon for a freshman, let alone any underclassman. He was learning the shooting guard position and the point guard position. Now, when it comes to football, everyone on this team on both sides of the ball is basically learning a new system, which is going to be a challenge in and of itself. But for a guy like Morrison, he has to learn two positions. And, one of them is the most important position on the field, which is quarterback. So I think the key with Morrison is the fact that Rich Rodriguez has already publicly announced that Morrison is not just going to be the backup quarterback. He's actually going to play receiver and be an active role, maybe even start for the Wildcats on the offensive side of the ball. So, how you learn the passing game, I guess there's some similarities there with the quarterback working with the receivers and understanding the plays and stuff. But you do worry about reps at both positions. I mean, is Morrison going to get enough reps as a receiver, and is he going to get enough reps as a quarterback? And when you talk about the quarterback position, like you said, with this new offense, I mean, it's hard to imagine that any quarterback, especially someone as aggressive and big and strong as Matt Scott, avoiding that contact, avoiding that, maybe not a major injury, but just something nagging where, sidelines him for a possession or two or even a down. I mean, Morrison could be in a situation where he's playing receiver on second down and he's playing quarterback on third down, and it could be a key situation like a 3rd and 7 where they got to convert. The good news is Morrison is very talented. He did play quarterback in high school, very similar style to Scott in high school, dual threat, ran for a lot, threw for a lot. But like you point out, it is going to be a big challenge, and as much emphasis as we put on Matt Scott, I mean, thinking about what Morrison is going to face this year as a receiver, probably a starter, and then playing backup for the most important position on the field, it's just an incredible task. And I guess if anyone's up for it, it is Morrison, but time will tell.
Well, and Morrison is no stranger to the quarterback position. His senior year, had a very good senior year, in fact, playing in Royce City out in Texas, threw for 23 touchdowns and only 6 picks, and which 4 of those 6 picks happened to be in the second game of the year where he's still getting his feet wet. But he has had a good stretch as far as quarterback goes. He threw for 300-plus yards in 4 straight weeks in the middle of the season, kind of as he for Royce City, and also had a really good game against Highland Park, Texas, where he went 17 for 31 with 302 yards, 4 touchdowns. Also ran for 210 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. So Morrison is no stranger to the dual threat system. Now, he hasn't really had his mind frame on quarterback in the last couple of years, so, obviously he has to go back and kind of retrain his thought process, but an incredible task to put on a kid to see if he's going to be effective. I mean, really, to learn 2 positions, he's going to really have to put in the work, especially since it's a new offense. It's hard enough for most guys to play 2 positions in an offense they've been running in for 3 years, much less to have a guy come and learn a new offense at two different positions.
I think what's interesting about the dual threat quarterback, I mean, Rich Rodriguez talked about this on Media Day as well, is that the new NFL prototypical quarterback is probably the dual threat quarterback. And it's almost equivalent to, Little League Baseball. I mean, usually your pitcher is your best shortstop, your home run hitter, your best catcher when you need him. I kind of equate dual threat quarterbacks to the same situation. I mean, these guys in high school, they're usually your most athletic player. They can play any of the, safety positions or cornerback positions. They can run, they can throw, they kind of do everything, whatever the coach is asking for. And I think on that level, Rodriguez has 2 very capable quarterbacks in his system right now, at least for this next year while we're transitioning to the new offense. But both Scott and Morrison are football players, and I think that's the key word.
A lot of times, like you mentioned, those situations, it's just a mere factor of getting the best guy on your team the ball, whether he's a pitcher, putting him in a position, like shortstop, where he's going to see the most action. So do you think, as far as Morrison is concerned, do you think he's really that talented at both positions, or is it just a lack of talent at those positions?
I think Rich Rodriguez will be hoping and praying that Morrison and Scott stay healthy so that Morrison can play receiver and Scott can play quarterback. For your exact point, Morrison actually is a very proven, very quick, very fast, great hands receiver, can make plays on special teams as a return man. And I definitely think that Rich Rodriguez is going to want to see Morrison making plays after the catch as opposed to throwing the football. He's tough, he's gritty. Stoops talked very highly of him last year, even though the team was struggling as a whole. And I think, like we both said, Morrison's a football player, and I think his aggressive style might come out more as better as a receiver as opposed to a quarterback. So I'm thinking Rich Rod is hoping that Scott can stay on his feet for the whole season.
Well, I think that's probably unanimous as far as the coaching staff goes. I think Matt Scott, at this point in time, definitely gives the Arizona football team their best chance to win. Now, we'll see with a guy like Richard Morrison if he does come into play. I think he's the type of kid that the learning curve will be huge and very noticeable as the season goes on if given the chance. Well, we have talked a little longer on the quarterback scenario than anticipated, Gary, so we will have to have the next episode of the Wildcast, your 24/7 sports network and wildcatsportsreport.com podcast. The next podcast later in the week, we'll be talking about the passing game. I want to go over a little bit of Dan Buckner and Austin Hill, as well as guys like Terrence Miller. Gary, it's always been a pleasure, and look for later in the week our next edition of the Wildcast. Again, we will be discussing the passing game and some of the receivers and how they are doing and how we expect them to do. For Gary Randazzo and Canyon Allis, you have listened to the Wildcast.